And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call, as tonight the Hoosiers, the Indiana Hoosiers, defeat the Wisconsin Badgers 59-58. Wait, we did win, right? That was like the oddest ending to a game I've ever seen. Hayes 3 goes in. Colin Hartman is, way too close to him. And Assembly Hall, it felt like the fans didn't know whether they should cheer, whether there was a foul. But yes, the Hoosiers won 59-58. Toughing out a game at home in which the offense wasn't really there. It was ragged. It was ugly. But with mental toughness and physical toughness, frankly, the Hoosiers win. A game that if you had told me they would have been in a couple weeks ago, I wouldn't have felt very confident. But somehow Indiana found a way, and we are going to break it all down for you on this episode of the Assembly Call. I am your host, Jared Morris. I'm excited to lead you through the proceedings this evening. And I am joined tonight by our usual crew, Andy Bottoms, Ryan Phillips, and Will DeWitt. So let's get right to it, fellas. I will open up with the banner moment. And to me, the banner moment, it was really how Indiana came out in the second half. Because, the Hoosiers started the first half pretty well, but Wisconsin really gained control. And, Indiana was able to make a little run there at the end of the first half. Wisconsin makes a 3 to go in at halftime up 28-24. And I really wanted to see how this Indiana team would come out, because we know in years past, this hasn't been a team that has come out under Tom Crean and played real well at the start of second halves. Well, tonight, Indiana came out and just slowly chipped away. They won the first 4-minute sequence 5-4. Then they won the next one 5-2 and got it tied at 34-34. Then they won the next one 6-2, took that 40-36 lead. And really from there, it felt like Indiana was in control. And even though Wisconsin, only lost by 1, it felt like Wisconsin was constantly the team trying to get over the hump, and Indiana would make a free throw or make a bucket to stay in the lead. But I thought they really set the tone, especially on defense, holding Wisconsin basically under a point per minute for the first 11 minutes of the second half. And how often is it that we come on here on the Assembly Call and talk about how defense keyed an IU victory? Well, tonight, defense keyed an IU victory. The Hoosiers really came out, defended well to start the second half, and did enough on offense to take the lead. And I'm really proud of how the guys played. This is a team, a program that, at times this year and certainly last year, when the shots weren't falling, when the offense was struggling, this team would really go into a rut. But tonight they battled through it and really played well enough on the defensive end to get this victory. So a tip of the cap to all the guys for how they played on defense, especially there early. That is my banner moment, because frankly, if this team, even though they struggled offensively tonight, even though they're going to be without James Blackman Jr., we know this team is going to be able to score points. But if they can defend like they did tonight, and the final number for Wisconsin in terms of points per possession was just .93, so an excellent number. If they can do that, this team can do a lot of things going forward in Big Ten play. All right, let's go around the horn, get everybody's thoughts. Andy, we will start with you, your bottoms line on tonight's IU victory.
Yeah, along the same lines, I was going to touch on the defense, but I think I'll talk just more generally about resiliency. I thought at the end of the first half, they got down by 9 at one point, really, fought their way back in, got to within 1, that 3 went in at the half, but like you said, really, bounced back and played well. The middle stretch of that first half was just ugly basketball, as were large stretches of the second half, quite honestly. But I really thought they didn't hang their heads. Even guys like, I'll bring this up since I'm the fan club leader, but even a guy like Robert Johnson, did not play well, had 5 turnovers, passed up open shots, but didn't hang his head, made a huge defensive play there at the end and knocked the ball away and dive on the floor. And I think you can go down the list of everybody that played and think of positive contributions they made. I thought Juwan Morgan played a great game. You look at the box score, and he had no points and 5 fouls. But I really thought he gave him some really good minutes. OG was fantastic again, continues to play well, and they picked up the slack. I think that's what we're starting to see, that there's enough options that when not everybody is hitting. This was a game that Hartman didn't play very well and didn't play very long in because he was there, and a lot of guys getting fouls. But players just stepped up. Zeisloft hit a big shot down to the end, and I thought they really rallied together incredibly well. And the turnovers were still ugly, but they ratcheted those down as we went forward in the game. And I just thought really came together. So maybe this is a win that we'll look back on and really say they found a way to get things done when the basketball wasn't always very pretty, and they found a way to do it with defense, and hopefully that becomes I don't think it'll ever be the calling card of this team, but at least something that we can count on from time to time.
All right, let's go over to Ryan for his rant. He was very adamant about what he was going to talk about to ensure that Andy and I didn't steal it. So you're on, Ryan.
Well, I think you got to talk about Yogi Ferrell tonight. I mean, he didn't have a great game for most of it. He really didn't. He was struggling with the defense of Bronson Koenig and a few other guys who were rotating over on him. Finished with 19 points, which is nice, but he also had 5 turnovers, only 3 rebounds. I mean, he wasn't lighting up the stat sheet, but late in the game when it was tied, under a minute to go, comes down, hits a clutch jumper, pull-up jumper in the lane. Then he hit all of his free throws down the stretch, just nailed them perfectly, no questions asked to close out the game. I mean, that's your senior leader at point guard. He's diving on the floor late after a bad possession. That's your senior leader stepping up in a big moment, and that's why we love this guy. That's why we love watching him play, and we always talk about, well, we might be taking him for granted. Tonight he showed down the stretch after having a bad game for most of it, slammed the door shut on Wisconsin, did what he had to do, stepped up and made some big shots, and stepped to that free throw line and took care of business late. So there were guys, I mean, you could talk about OG Anunoby, who had a phenomenal game. Again, as Andy said, Juwan Morgan didn't score, had a phenomenal game. I thought defensively he was outstanding when he was in there on Nigel Hayes. The fact that our 2 freshmen, other than Thomas Bryant's the McDonald's All-American, big name, everything, the 2 other freshmen were stuck guarding Wisconsin's best player most of the night and did an excellent job. I mean, that bodes so well for the future. Those guys both stepped up and played great defense. And the whole team did, and I thought Yogi played really, really good defense on Bronson Koenig, but him stepping up in that last 5 minutes was absolutely huge and won the game for us.
No, I agree with you. And to your point on Yogi, he in the first half, 4 points, 0 assists, 4 turnovers. He and Troy Williams didn't play very well in the first half either. And I'll pat myself a little bit on the back for this. You guys know I make a lot of predictions. Most of them don't come true. I believe I guaranteed Nick Zeisloff would make a 3, and he airballed it. But I did say after the under 16 timeout, Yogi and Troy have combined for 6 points so far. We're losing. Prediction: they finish with 22 plus combined, and we win. They finished with 21 combined. Yogi had 19. Troy only had 2. But, Troy did a lot of good things in the second half. Ended up leading the team with 7 rebounds, had a couple of assists, didn't turn it over. I thought those guys really led Indiana, when it counted. And Yogi especially, obviously, with the free throws and everything he did. So really great job by both of those guys. All right, Will, let's finish out our opening statements. Your stat of the night on this IU victory.
Well, per your request, I broke down the game into quarters and kind of kept track of the turnovers and see how that kind of played out. So as you know, the game started off with a barrage of turnovers, with 40% of our possessions turning into turnovers at 6 out of 15. Second quarter of the game, kind of dropped that down a little bit here to 26.7%, 4 out of the 15 possessions there, so we're trending in the right direction. But then to start the half, here come the turnovers again, up to 37.5%. But then, for the final 10 minutes of the game, we dropped that number down to 17.6%, only 3 turnovers in the final 10 minutes, on 17 possessions. So looking here, I just think that IU has a difficult time starting each half with the turnovers, and they find a way to limit those as the half kind of wears on.
It does. So you said the end of the second part of the first half was still 23%?
End of the first half was still 26%. Not good, but at least it was trending downward.
Yeah. It's amazing when you're so bad to start the halves what qualifies for improvement. Yeah. And again, the Hoosiers, for as good as they were on defense, only 59 points, less than 0.94 points per possession, and still turned it over on 30% of our possessions. So while the defense left a lot to be excited about, the offense left a lot to be desired, and we'll talk about that as we go through this episode of the Assembly Call, especially what the impact of not having James Blackman Jr. will be, since we know now that James will be out for the season. And so we'll get to all that here in just a minute. I do want to remind you all to make sure, if you are not already, to get on our email list. It is the best way to connect with the show. You will get our post-game emails, which we only send out to our subscribers. It includes my analysis of the game, Andy's analysis, Will's stat of the night. They're in-depth. We try to give a lot of insight in those emails. So to get on that list, go to assemblycall.com/subscribe or text Indiana to 44144, and then all you have to do is text your email address, and you will be on the list. You will join over 1,400 fellow IU fans who get our emails, so don't miss it. Assemblycall.com/subscribe or text Indiana to 44144. All right, well, you are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. We are talking about Indiana's 59-58 victory tonight over Wisconsin. And, you know, this was I want to talk a little bit more, actually, Ryan, about, you know, you talked about Yogi Ferrell, and you talked about how, you know, for a lot of the night he was struggling and came up late. But I want to talk about his defense, because I thought the defense that he played on Bronson Koenig for a lot of the night really helped Indiana with what they wanted to do defensively. You know, Koenig ended up finishing with 15 points, got a lot of those late, but I thought for most of the game, Yogi made it really hard just for Koenig to even get the ball, just to get a good look. And so, you know, I think this was one of those games where you look at what Yogi was contributing offensively early with just the 4 points, you know, no assists, the 4 turnovers, and same thing with a guy like Robert Johnson, who, you know, just so out of sorts offensively, but defensively brought it. I mean, you know, Dan Dakich even talked about it on the broadcast. It was one of the better defensive games from Yogi. Did you get that too? Get that sense from Yogi that he was really locked in defensively, even though he was struggling offensively?
Yeah, I think from the get-go, Yogi just really wanted to beat Wisconsin. As a senior who hasn't been able to do that very much, I think he really, really wanted to win that game. And I think that he was very much locked in on Bronson Koenig. And Koenig, as you said, scored a lot of those points late. He was 2 of 6 from 3, 4 of 12 from the field. He got 5 of those 15 points at the free throw line, and we all kind of know the foul calls during that game were a little sketchy, especially in the first half. Well, it's the Big Ten, so you expect that.
Have you ever not complained about foul calls after an IU-Wisconsin game?
No, that is absolutely 100% true. I have never not complained about the officiating. Luckily, it didn't come back to hurt us tonight. I thought the second half was much better. To give the officials credit, I thought the second half was much better. The first half was kind of atrocious, though. But again, I think that I think that Yogi really stepped up and was motivated tonight for a lot of reasons. Probably facing a great player like Koenig, you get motivated for that. Playing Wisconsin, you want to beat Wisconsin because of how often we have lost to Wisconsin. So I think that had a lot to do with it. But he looked like a guy who was locked in on the defensive end all night. A lot of guys were missing shots for IU early. He wasn't the only one. I noted on Twitter that there were probably 4 or 5 3-pointers that were halfway down and came out for Zeisloft, Yogi, Robert Johnson had one. I mean, so nobody was really performing well offensively, but I thought the defense made up for that, especially from a guy like Yogi who was really locked in.
Andy, let me ask you a question about Thomas Bryant, because for most of the first half, all Indiana really had going for it offensively was Thomas Bryant. He had 10 points. He was 5 of 6 from the field. He showed us his array of moves on the block, which continued to impress, and he was getting rebounds. In the second half, Thomas didn't score. He only took 1 shot, and it wasn't like he was in foul trouble. He finished the game with 2 fouls, was still playing a lot. And I thought playing some pretty good defense, too, for a lot of the time when he was in there, but just unable to get looks. What was that? Was there something Wisconsin was doing defensively that kept him from getting the ball? Did Indiana just go away from it? Because it really seemed like, in the Nebraska game and in the first half, they made a real concerted effort to get it to him, but then the looks dried up in the second half.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of that is Wisconsin. I think part of it's just, what IU can do from a spacing standpoint without Blackman, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about as we go, but it's one of the things that has come up in these last couple games when he's there, and it really has allowed teams to at least try to pack it in. And Wisconsin's one that's going to do that anyway. I mean, they're going to certainly the way IU is playing defense tonight, they're going to force you to shoot over the top of them and make a few shots before they adjust. And they made some nice adjustments with him. I think there were a couple occasions where IU's just trying to make the entry pass from too far away. A couple times they tried to instead of lobbing it, they tried to, make a bounce pass in there. I just thought some of them were just too far, and it allowed, the Wisconsin defender, who is typically Happ, who kind of played around to the side, just that extra chance to, get around and kind of knock the ball away on plays where they did try to get him the ball. So, they did try to isolate him late in that play, about a couple minutes left, and he probably ended up being a turnover where he got blocked and kind of struggled to get open there. So I think, again, it's, kind of an adjustment process for him as we go through this. We saw him have the really rough game at Rutgers, bounce back really nicely. This was kind of a little bit of both of those things, but, he's going to have to adjust. I mean, as people get more film on him and, see what he's done in these last couple games, they're going to make adjustments with how they defend him, and I think he needs to make adjustments with, how he works himself to get open, and even a case where, can you set him some screens, get him that little bit of extra space that he might need.
Yeah, I think that Wisconsin really in the second half made a concerted effort to bring the help side man in closer on the back of him so that once he got the ball, it'd be double teamed. IU, the guards probably recognize that, decide not to throw it in there because they know the double team's coming, possibly to risk a steal. When they did throw it in, as Andy said, there were a couple bad passes that got knocked away. So it wasn't like IU necessarily went away from giving Bryant the ball. I think that they just saw better options on the floor. Now, comes the classic argument: should you start forcing it down to him when he doesn't have any points in the second half? And I think that a solid argument can be made for that. If you throw it in there and they double, he's pretty good at passing out of it. So we'll have to see if they make an adjustment to that adjustment, because I'm sure teams will watch how Wisconsin handled him in the second half and adjust accordingly and look to do the same thing, maybe send the double team when he's on that side of the floor. If you saw it a few times, Dan Dockich mentioned it, they isolated Yogi on the same side as Bryant once, and then they did it with a few times with Bielfeldt. And that's a triangle offense principle where you put your best shooter and your best post guy on the same side of the floor. You can't double off of the passer because he's wide open for a three, and you can't give help up from the post. So Crean did adjust to that in the second half, but they didn't really go to it too much. I'd be interested to see if we continue to do something like that. Isolate our best shooter on the side with our best post player.
Good analysis there, Ryan. Question for you. Max Bielfeldt, 5 points, no rebounds, no assists. Worse than advertised, as advertised, or better than advertised because the 2 buckets were huge?
He's still better than advertised. I'm sorry. Every day that man walks around in Indiana uniform is better than advertised. That 3 was gigantic that he hit. He had a nice little post move finish. Bryant played a lot tonight, and they were rotating in those freshmen in the post too. So it was kind of an odd fit for him because I don't think he could really defend Hayes or Happ. I mean, it's a weird matchup for him because they're more athletic. And so I didn't expect to see him too much tonight unless Bryant was in foul trouble, just because it's an odd matchup for him. Wisconsin doesn't have a true banger in the post. They send those 2 guys down there. Those 2 guys are more face-up guys, the back-to-the-basket guys. And Max is a guy who is at his best when he's defending a guy's back. Not letting a guy get by him or get position on him, things like that. But those 2 are face-up guys who are going to catch the ball and turn and try and make something happen. So it just didn't fit, especially with Anunoby and Morgan playing such good defense on Nigel Hayes. So I expect him in the game next time to get his normal minutes, but tonight I just didn't think the matchup was there.
Will, question for you real quick. Tom Crean in his pregame comments mentioned how important rebounding would be. And if you look at Wisconsin's statistical profile, they aren't very good at anything except for rebounding, where they're in the top 40 in the country coming into the game in both offensive rebounding percentage and defensive rebounding percentage. How did the Hoosiers do on the boards tonight?
And it really depends on which side you're talking about here. Wisconsin came in the game ranked 38th. And on defense, only limiting opposing offenses to grab about 25.6% of their offensive boards. Well, today, IU only got 3 boards on offense, or only 13%, and that's not too good. And then on the other side, IU's ranked 4th, and on top of that, I forgot to mention real quick that IU's ranked 4th in terms of offensive rebounding in the country as well, grabbing 40.2% of their misses. So to only get 13 is drastically low, and to be honest, that was a kind of a big surprise for me. And then on the other end, IU kind of struggles to keep opposing offenses off the glass, ranked 238th, allowing offenses to get about 32.1% of their offensive rebounds. And then today, Wisconsin got 7 of them for 22.6%, which, it's not terrible, especially for all the missed shots that were kind of going on today. But other than that, I thought rebounding was pretty well on the defensive boards, especially Bryant, who had 7. He only averages about 4.8 a game, so for him to get 7 going up against, Harp, I think his name is, or Happ, who gets like 8 rebounds a game. Yeah, 8 rebounds a game. I thought that was good on his part too.
Yeah, and something I actually forgot to mention this after the Nebraska game that we're starting to see from Bryant a little bit more is an ability to rebound out of his area. We talked about how limited he is with his lateral movement. But we're starting to see him, become a better rebounder, rebounding out of his area. And I saw a couple times today, guarding dribblers, he didn't get blown by, force the guy, into the baseline, cut off the lane. Thomas really making some improvements both as a rebounder and a defender. And I thought really that's how he contributed in the second half, even though he wasn't scoring. Wisconsin wasn't able to just abuse him on pick and rolls or take advantage of that as we've seen other teams do. So that's another positive. Andy, I want to talk real quick about the freshmen, the non-Bryant freshmen who just continue to impress here in Big Ten play. We mentioned a little bit about Juwan Morgan, 0 points, only 2 rebounds, but played really tough defense, brought a lot of energy. And OG Anunoby was the team's second leading scorer. 11 points, a couple of rebounds. Now, he did get in foul trouble in the second half, but he made 3 more three-pointers, which I think makes him 6 for 6 in Big Ten play. Talk a little bit about OG. I don't remember who it was on Twitter. Oh, it was Rick Bozich on Twitter, talking about OG and saying, all the recruiting analysts are going to have a lot of explaining to do, how this guy wasn't even a top 200 recruit. But ever since Big Ten play started, he's been one of Indiana's better players.
I do think they both played extremely well, and a lot of it is just energy and positioning and awareness. If I had to boil it down to a few things, Morgan, Dakich mentioned it on the game. He made a great play at the rim on defense, and he was the first guy to the basket on a shot that I think ended up being made, but was the first one down the floor. And he was winded coming back the other way, but he was just giving it all that he had out there. Maybe because he knew that he would soon get called for another foul by guarding Nigel Hayes, as everyone did tonight that had their chance at him. But I really thought, Hartman struggled with Hayes early, got those 2 fouls. And OG, the first guy off the bench, and he's earned that. I think the way he's played over the last 5 games and played well again tonight. He's taken, the three-pointers are, while it's somewhat amazing that he hasn't missed any in Big Ten play, I would say that he hasn't taken any bad ones either. He's taken shots within the flow of the offense, been able to step into them, and they really haven't been rushed. And obviously it's a confidence thing at some point as well, where we have the other end of that right now with Robert Johnson, but OG is playing with a really high level of confidence, and part of that, for him seems to get his energy from making a good play on defense. He got a couple huge blocks. The first time Hayes beat, he was guarding Hayes. Hayes kind of had a step on him, but he was able, his length to knock the ball out of bounds. And I think he's a guy, maybe unlike a lot of the others on the team, who derives his offensive energy and excitement from how he plays on defense. And both those guys we've talked about for weeks now, from just a fundamentals and positioning, are ahead of their years, I guess you'd say, as freshmen. And just overall awareness, when you watch them off the ball on defense, their ability to understand what the other team's trying to run and how they rotate and recognize that is a lot different than other guys on this team. And that's only going to get better, obviously, as they get more experience. But the other thing I thought Dakich brought up with, I think it was Anunoby, could probably say the same thing, is just no ego with these guys. And so we've kind of lamented some other guys who feel like they need to get theirs, or they've got to, looking ahead to the NBA and whatever else. Those guys just are doing whatever it takes for the team to win, and I think they've both done a great job of that, and at this point have cemented roles for themselves that may only grow as the year goes on.
I thought it was so impressive that you knew coming into this game Nigel Hayes was the guy Wisconsin would focus on getting going, and he did finish with 15 points, but 3 of 13 from the field. OG and Juwan were guarding him a lot of the night, and yes, he got 11 free throws and did make some experienced plays, to get to the line, against the inexperienced freshman, but for the most part they held their own. It was really impressive. Ryan, you want to add something about OG?
Yeah, here's the thing about OG Anunoby is you talk to people who were scouts, and yeah, he didn't get rated very high by the recruiting services, but you also talk to people and you watch him. It was obvious from in this class nationally, from his sophomore to his senior year, nobody improved more nationally. No one. And IU offered him early, had a great vision that he would get better, and you're seeing this guy come in and he's just on a massive upward trajectory. And this isn't out of nowhere. It's been happening since his sophomore year. Also, I'm kind of loving that these guys are interchangeable. They're both going in, guarding the same people, playing the same, can both play high, can both play low with Juwan Morgan and Anunoby. Are we ready to dub them Morganoby yet? I mean, do we have a new Sheila Depot? Is that are we getting close to that, Jared? I mean, you got Sheila Depot over your right shoulder there.
Someone turn off Ryan's mic right now. I'm just kidding. Say it again. That's actually not a bad one.
Morganobi.
All right, let's take that under advisement. That's an interesting one. Hey, it might work. You're right. The Sheila Depot coaster right back there. We're going to go now to the president.
I think we should maybe if we combine both their first names to get in a Star Wars reference, we've got OG-Wan Morganobi.
OG-Wan. I love it.
All right, OG-Wan Morganobi. This has to happen.
I like it. All right, OG-Wan Morganobi.
Start printing the T-shirt.
All right, I like it.
This is people are just throwing money at their screens right now. This is a can't lose.
That's a great idea. All right, so let's go over now to the president of the Robert Johnson fan club, who for most of the night for the Robert Johnson fan club, it was pretty rough. As you know, I tweeted at one point that Robert just looks awkward out there. Like, he doesn't take shots when he's open. He's really tentative dribbling. He had 5 more turnovers tonight. You know, did have 3 assists, but only 1 rebound. You know, only 3 points, and yet, you know, I feel like that doesn't tell the whole story of his game because he did play good defense, and by God, he made the play of the game at the end there with that steal where, you know, got his hand into the passing lane and then finished it with incredible hustle to dive on the floor and create that turnover. It was a great play. Andy, you know, some more thoughts from you on Robert, who, you know, again, just seems so out of sorts offensively, and that has to get corrected. We need more from him offensively with James Blackman Jr. out. But this was not a total loss for him. He did a good job on the other end of the floor.
Yeah, I guess if there's anything I take away as a hopeful thought is that he played really great defense and he didn't let his offensive struggles, you know, hurt him on that end of the floor. I thought he did a great job offensively all night. Guarded Showalter quite a bit with Yogi on Koenig. And Showalter's been a guy who has had some solid games this season for Wisconsin and who can get going. And I thought, you know, Robert Johnson did a really good job with him, you know, for the majority of the game and did well the times that he was on Koenig. You know, offensively, I don't know if he is, he's hurt. I know, you know, Karina talked about him being banged up a couple weeks ago, and that's really bothering him. But he's definitely just overthinking everything. You can see right now. And I know Brian, one of our, you know, chat moderators and great friend of the show, you know, talked about Crean set him down toward the end of the Kennesaw State game and seemed to be kind of lecturing him about something and felt like he was in the doghouse a little bit, and he really hasn't been the same since that game. And that was a game I actually thought, as I recall, he played pretty well in. But he just seems like he's overthinking things. He's passing up open shots that he was taking earlier in the season when he was shooting the ball so well from 3. And then there were a couple times when he did shoot where he just hesitated so much you just knew it wasn't going in. And you know, he did make 1 3 in the game, as I recall, and the one that rattled out, one of, you know, 4 or 5 that rattled out, was the first shot in the entire game that he really stepped into confidently and took it. And I think he's one, he has to take those shots, particularly with Blackman out. He has to be able to be a guy that stretches the floor. And quite honestly, I don't know if that's something that's weighing on him and feeling as though he needs to do more. I think Yogi's certainly been more aggressive with Blackman out in these last couple games, and I don't know if Robert is feeling some of the same thing, but he's definitely a guy that IU needs to get back on track. And you know, Zaisel hit a couple shots, but he, you know, struggling with his shot a little bit as well in Big Ten play. So, you know, the importance of those two is magnified a great deal with James out of there, and so. You know, hope Robert can whatever is bothering him, he can you know, he can kind of shake from his system, because he's a really important player to this team before, and he certainly is more so now with Blackman out for what seems like the season.
Right. You know, you look at, you know, Johnson's stats, and after he put up 17 against Notre Dame, he's only been able to muster 5 points, then 0, and then the last 2 games he's only got 3 apiece. So definitely struggling out there in the offensive end.
Yeah, no, we got to get Robert going. There's no question about it, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in the show, just the impact of James Blackman Jr.'s injury. But I have a controversial comment to make next, and I want to get your thoughts on it. So we'll do that here in just a minute. I do want to take this opportunity to remind everybody that the Assembly Call is a listener-supported show, and it absolutely makes our day every single time that we see a donation support come in. It's continued to happen, and we really, really, really appreciate it. You know, it allows us to expand our coverage, like hosting our chat, which is going on right now over at assemblycall.com/live. And so if you're listening in on the radio, we want to welcome all of our radio listeners. listeners on the Sports Buzz in Louisville who are listening in. If you guys are listening on the radio, you can go to assemblycall.com/live as well. Participate in our chat. Megan, Trenton, and Brian do a great job in there moderating the chat. And that's one of those things that we have to pay for, and that's why it really helps that you all, send in your support and allow us to do this. We really, really appreciate it. The best way to do it is go to assemblycall.com/support. There are many different ways that you can support. You can actually do a recurring donation if you want. You can do a single-time donation, choose your amount, whatever works. And then we also have some links there to where if you want to purchase some goods from sites like Fanatics or the IU store, you can use our affiliate link, and we'll actually get a cut of the sales. So stuff that you might purchase anyway, it's also a good way to support the Assembly Call. So assemblycall.com/support. We greatly, greatly appreciate it. All right, well, this is the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I am your host, Jared Morris, and we are talking about Indiana's 59-58 victory over Wisconsin tonight. A tough win for Indiana, a gritty win, as Tom Crean just mentioned in his postgame press conference. The Hoosiers did not give up the lead over the final 14 minutes. I believe it was Yogi who hit a go-ahead shot. He's hit a lot of those in the second half, it seems like, over the past few games, where he gives Indiana the lead and we don't give that lead back. And as impressive as the first part of the second half was to get that lead back, not allowing Wisconsin to take the lead back over the final 14 minutes was also very impressive. And, guys, I think a big key to it was Troy Williams. And I took some grief about this on Twitter, but I said with about 5 minutes to go in the second half, I'm proud of how Troy's playing in the second half. Again, was pretty much a non-factor there in the first half. Didn't score, only had one rebound, had one turnover. But I thought in the second half he came out and played within himself. He grabbed 6 more rebounds. He got an assist or 2, if I recall correctly, did get a bucket. Only finished with the 2 points, but the 2 assists, the 2 offensive rebounds, 7 rebounds overall, and I thought played better defense. Now, there were certainly some anecdotal examples of his fundamentals getting him in trouble, some bad footwork leading to a guy driving by him, a backdoor cut that was pretty obvious where he got faked out on. But he was in better position, was contributing more as part of the team defense, which we haven't seen as much. And look, you talk about a guy who's been a turnover machine, and he didn't play as much, but he also didn't do a lot of the wild driving stuff. And only having 2 turnovers in a 1-point game, him not having that 3rd or 4th or 5th turnover that we've seen recently could be the difference in this game. And I wonder. We've seen over these last couple games him initiating the offense a little bit less, even his minutes going down a little bit less, but it seems like Indiana's playing a little bit better. And, if we can get Troy to focus on making the hustle plays, rebounding, doing the things that he does well, working the baseline, even though that didn't go as well tonight, that could really help this Indiana team. But he can't just fade into the background. He needs to be like he was in the second half where he's still making the hustle plays. Ryan, what did you see out of Troy tonight? And do you think Indiana still needs more from him? Or, was what we saw in the second half kind of a template for how Troy can really contribute positively to Indiana victories?
I think Indiana does need more from him. I think tonight, usually he's running that baseline. He's an assassin down there. And for some reason, I don't know what he was doing. Maybe he was just too deep along the baseline, or maybe there just wasn't much there for him, and he was actually kind of getting in the way. Yogi threw it down to him a few times down there, and nothing came of it because it was just a crowd of people down there. So I don't know if Wisconsin packing it in with fewer shooters on the floor had something to do with that or what, but he just didn't look as dynamic on the offensive end. His one basket was great. It was he got the ball. It was a steal that he helped create, and then he was down the floor and finished on a run out for a layup. But yeah, I thought offensively, really, it was a nothing game for him. He missed a couple shots he definitely shouldn't have taken. But his activity level on the defensive end, got a couple of offensive rebounds, as you mentioned. Those are big deals, and each one. Every time you get a second opportunity, that's a big deal, and he's a guy who can do that. And I think that defensively, you're right. He had better energy. He had a couple guys blown by him, but I think that's going to happen to him no matter what we do, as far as putting him in better positions against other players. But he's really just a fascinating case because there's so much potential there, and you feel like he's not living up to it, but at the same time, he'll show you these moments of brilliance. And I thought in the second half, as you said, he was better, more within the team concept defensively, more just moving the ball on offense instead of just looking for his and looking for the first opportunity to score. So yeah, I thought it was a better second half, but make no mistake, in Big Ten play, as this season goes along, he's got to be a guy who can get you 10 points on offense at least. He's got to be a guy who's going to grab those 7 rebounds he had tonight with regularity, and he's got to be a guy who is contributing more and not hurting this team with turnovers.
Agreed. It was just nice to see him not force it, and maybe it's one of those, you take a couple steps back to take a few forward. I mean, he has the worst turnover percentage of any big conference player in America. It's been that bad. And so, I think seeing him do that is a sign of progress, because things are going to get rough for this Indiana team. I mean, look, the Hoosiers are 3-0, 2 road wins, already a win over Wisconsin, who's had our number recently. Big Ten play could not have started better, except for the injury news that we got today. And Andy, I want to talk about this, the impact of not having James Blackman Jr. Because, look, Indiana's 3-0 without him. The defense is better. And, I dug up some interesting numbers, which, in the 5 games Blackman played this year against top 100 competition, he only made 32% of his 2-point field goals. His 3-point percentage was 42%, but that's still lower than what he normally shoots. And his point per game average was 12, where it's 15.8 otherwise. And so he's been a guy who has built a lot of his numbers against some of the lesser competition, hasn't always stepped up against the good competition, and that goes back to last year, where in Big Ten play, from Big Ten season on, including the Wichita State game, in road games against top 100 competition, only shot 28% from 2 and 25% from 3. So a guy who has struggled in bigger games, and yet we've seen Indiana's offense stagnate and not be as explosive without him. And I thought Dan Dakich made a great point that, Blackman can score easy, and at times he can. And that's why at times he keys Indiana's big runs. So what do you see as the adjustments Indiana will need to make with James Blackman out, and how big of an impact do you think it has on Indiana long term for this season?
It's funny. It's one where I think people look at it from a defensive standpoint and look how poorly this team's been on defense, and the fact that he is considered by many to be the team's worst perimeter defender. And you would, on the one hand, you feel like you want to say, well, this is going to help one of the weaknesses of this team. On the flip side, it hurts the strength of the team, because no matter what he's done against some of this other competition, the threat of him on the floor and the way that defenses have to account for him, with guys driving in and kicking the ball out to him, that's important, and it's become more important with Zysloft and Robert Johnson struggling a bit. And I think, that's what really magnifies the importance of those guys. Niego got a few minutes tonight. I was, again, surprised to see he didn't get very many in these other couple games, because they just don't have a lot of backcourt depth. And tonight was a game I don't think we saw some of those bigger lineups where, it was kind of Yogi and 4 forwards out there. I don't recall any of those being out there tonight, at least not for any prolonged period of time. And you also saw, even in the very brief stretches that Yogi was out of the game, it was a train wreck on offense, where I think at least one shot clock violation, and I don't think any good shots in these couple times when when Crean would try to take him out and get him a little bit of extra rest. So I think that in and of itself, just from a minute standpoint for some of these guys, is impactful. And the spacing is really the other thing. Being able to have him out on the wing, and a guy who has shown the ability to confidently knock down those shots and even put the ball on the floor, is a huge drop off to what we're seeing, at least recently, from Zysloft and Johnson. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't get some of the confidence back that they've shown, but it is a factor. And so I think the spacing becomes more important. I think OG being able to step out and hit threes helps fill that void a little bit. I think Hartman in the games prior to today being able to step out and hit threes helps to ease that a bit. But I think it's hard to understate the importance of getting one or both of Robert Johnson and Zysloft back on track offensively, and particularly shooting the ball from the perimeter, because there just aren't a lot of other options in that regard. And while you can get great minutes from Juwan Morgan, he's not a guy who can step out and shoot it. Troy is not a guy who's shown the ability to really step out and shoot it. And so when this team plays fast and is really moving the ball and getting it inside and kicking it out, you got to have somebody on the other end of those passes. And Yogi's been forced to, I think, handle the ball a bit more, and he may need to be a bit more the guy on the receiving end of those passes going forward.
Troy won the 3-point contest at Hoosier Hysteria, if you forgot.
Oh, yes, clearly I did.
Ryan, your thoughts on the long-term impact of James Blackmon Jr.'s injury?
First of all, we of course wish him the best. I think that
we do.
It's such a rough blow for the kid to have to deal with this. Midway through the season, it's one thing you get it done going into the season, and then you've got a full year to recover before you have to worry about playing again. But having it happen mid-season, right when Big Ten play is starting, right when the team looks like it's starting to play a little better, I mean, it's just a blow not only to his career but just personally. So wishing him the best and a speedy recovery. That said, I agree that I think IU is going to be better defensively without him. But I also think that it'll be good for him to sit and watch the team play better defensively. Watching guys play a certain way. Sometimes injuries have that positive benefit of making you sit on the sideline and maybe understand the game more. Watch the game as a coach almost and absorb everything that's going on. As far as how Indiana's going to survive, I think we've got plenty of shooters on the perimeter. I think that was obviously James's biggest asset that he brought to the team was his shooting ability. He also got much better this year going to the hoop. So kudos to him for that, because last year that was a big struggle for him, was going up too weakly on, getting a shot blocked all the time, not going up strong, not finishing through contact. And he really had improved that. So now we need guys, as Andy said, Nick Zeislov's got to start knocking down shots. I was happy he pulled up on a 2 tonight, because that's got to be more part of his game. He's not going to get to the basket. But if guys are going to overplay him from 3, needs to get in there and be able to knock down a mid-range shot. As far as Robert Johnson, I don't know what's going on with him. As we said, he made the play of the game tonight defensively. Maybe that'll give him confidence, because right now he's clearly thinking about it. He'll catch the ball in a reversal, and earlier in the year he would just go straight up. Now he's kind of thinking about it. He traveled once tonight when he kind of pulled up and tried to pull up. I mean, just let it go, Robert. We know you can make that. He knows he can make them, and he's just got to get that back in his head. I mean, guys struggle and then they think about it. Right now, Zeislov is long on everything, and then he overcompensated tonight and airballed one. So now that clearly shows he's thinking about it. He's hitting back iron on everything, tries to compensate, shoots it short. Johnson right now overthinking everything. So I think that both guys just need to relax, calm down, play their game. We've got plenty of shooters. I think that, yes, in the immediate term it hurts you offensively, but if we can get those guys going, I don't think it's going to be a huge loss for a team that already has a lot of shooters.
Yeah, and I think, I agree with you. I mean, we wish James the best, and it's awful that an injury like this happens, his third knee injury. And I think it does lessen the ceiling of this team, because I think there was a thought heading into the season, hey, this could be a Final Four team. But I think that, kind of presupposed that James would, take the next step in his offensive development and also become a more consistent defender, and we didn't see that happen up until this point. And so, him not being there, I think it lessens, the ceiling, as I said, what Indiana could potentially be. But I think there are definitely ways Indiana can compensate and still be a team that competes for a top 4 spot in the Big Ten and can still make, a trip into the tournament second weekend. Will, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, Ryan, you kind of brought up how, JBJ, James Blackmon, he wasn't really paying too much. He needs to pay attention to the coaching and like the games and everything. Well, last game when he was on the bench, perhaps maybe just a little bit depressed because of the injury. But I kind of just noticed him, just from my standpoint, I'm not going to want to say this is for sure, but it just seems like he wasn't mentally in the game. I just saw him yawning more oftentimes than not. I just like to see him be a little bit more active on, a little bit more of an active role on the bench.
Yeah, I mean, Ryan was just yawning on the show, so earlier. That's one of those hard things.
Hey, you know what? Long night last night, all right, guys? I showed up for work today, didn't I?
You did. And that is hard, because that's, James just kind of has a laid-back personality. I think he's been dealing with questions like that for a long time. But you think back to the performance he had against Northwestern last year in the Big Ten tournament. 25 points, was all over the place on defense. But then the next night against Maryland, only had 6 points. Couldn't throw the ball into the ocean from the beach and struggled defensively. And those kind of up and downs, we've seen from James. And so I know it's going to be hard on him to be out. Tom Crean just mentioned in his press conference that, obviously the guys were down not having him, but that they're resilient. And so sometimes this is the thing that can make guys rally around each other. Everybody steps up, that next man up thing. We will see, because the Hoosiers are on this winning streak, and they're, all the goals are still out there in front of them. And, they're doing what they need to do right now, taking care of business, and hopefully that can continue. One more thing before we go to our preview of Ohio State. Will, an important note about free throws, especially after how bad the free throw shooting was last game.
Yeah, last game we kind of harped on them a little bit. They were only 14 of 23 with only making 60.9% of their shots. Well, today we finished a perfect 10 for 10 of the night. Yogi, a big 6 for 6, especially coming late in the game. But another fun fact was free throws, which I'm sure everyone was paying attention to, and I'm sure Karina isn't happy. But it took 32 minutes and 40 seconds to actually get to the line tonight. We didn't get to the line until about 7:20 remaining in the game, which is not good, but it worked out tonight. And maybe, the extra time off, the whole 32 and a half minutes there, allowed them to regroup a little bit and make those free throws.
Yeah, and thanks to Nigel Hayes' heave at the end, Indiana needed every single one of them to win.
Let me just say, I am shocked that we played Wisconsin and didn't shoot a free throw until 32 minutes into the game. Absolutely,
I'm sure you are.
Shocked that happened.
I'm sure you are. Ryan is the president of the anti-Wisconsin fan club, if this is your first time watching the show. All right, let's look at Indiana's next opponent. The game is Sunday, I believe, at noon Central, 1 Eastern, correct me if I'm wrong, on CBS against the Ohio State Buckeyes. It will be played against an NFL playoff game, but the diehards will be watching that game, and the true diehards will be here on the Assembly Call postgame show afterwards anyway. NFL be damned. Andy, what can we expect from the Ohio State Buckeyes, who have been red hot recently?
I think the game is actually at 1:30, and to be fair, even though I am a diehard, I am more of a diehard fan of my daughter, and will be watching the second half or most of it on my phone from her indoor soccer game. So
even though I'll not be on the show,
not watching the NFL.
Whoa.
I felt like you were just throwing shots at me there unnecessarily. I just wanted to make sure that it was.
No. Since when does girls indoor soccer trump IU basketball?
When you have a daughter, that's
when it's my kid, it does.
I don't have kids. I don't know anything about this stuff.
You're going to make an excellent father someday, Ryan. I can tell her.
Yeah, guaranteed. Guaranteed I'll be the best.
Try a sweater instead of a hoodie.
Have fun with your game, kid. Daddy's going to be home watching basketball.
Nice. So Ohio State is, they're coming in. They play Northwestern tomorrow night at Northwestern. That'll be their first Big Ten road game of the season. They played Minnesota and Illinois at home. So they've gotten a little bit of the same relatively easy treatment to open conference play as IU has, and they really had struggled early in the season. They're extremely young. I think in the KenPom rankings of experience, they're at 346th out of 351 teams. So I think they played one junior, and pretty much everybody else is a freshman or sophomore at this point. So they're really young, and I think the kind of thing you would expect them to come together a bit more as the season goes along, because they were 4-5 after their first 9 games, have won 6 straight since then. I'm not going to tell you they've beaten anybody good other than that win against Kentucky in New York. That was pretty surprising to everybody. Although Kentucky getting handled by LSU at the moment, as this goes into halftime, they're going to be down 10. But they've just got a lot of young guys, and they're starting to come together and play a little bit better. The one thing they have done, if you look at them statistically, and this isn't surprising anybody who has followed Thad Matta teams over the years, is they've been strong on defense. They're currently 33rd in the Pomeroy rankings defensively, so that will present a nice challenge for IU. They're really doing a good job of limiting opponents on 2-point shooting, and again, I think sometimes that can be a function of having played some lower tier teams, but they've got a couple good shot blockers in there. Keita Bates-Diop is a sophomore who's played really well. Freshman Daniel Giddens has a pretty good block percentage, and then Trevor Thompson, who is a transfer from Virginia Tech that I think IU is trying to get in on. I believe he was from Indianapolis, at least from the state of Indiana. He's had a good block rate as well so far this season. So it will be challenging for IU to score inside. I think, to the point that you guys made earlier, probably a different look than some of the big guys gave from Wisconsin. They're a little more mobile. At least a couple of these guys are maybe more traditional post guys, but that's something to watch for, just how well IU can get the ball inside and score. They've done a good job of limiting opponents at the free throw line as well. So, given the fact that IU didn't shoot any for the first 32 minutes of the game tonight, we'll see if the Hall of Calls can come through a little bit better on Sunday afternoon. Certainly didn't live up to its name tonight, but so that's really where they've had their bread and butter so far this year is on the defensive end. I think they're getting better offensively, but they're going to pound the ball inside a bit more, try to get to the rim because they haven't shot the three all that well. So a little bit tough to get a great read on them because they're so young and have really started to come together. But a good chance maybe tomorrow night for people to check them out as they play Northwestern, who's an improved team as well, and maybe see what we can get. But in general, they've looked better lately, looked pretty ugly to start, and should be a mixed bag. Certainly will be the toughest true road environment they've been in. They did play a road game at UConn, but other than that, a couple of neutral court games, and haven't really played away from home. So I think that'll be a factor as well, particularly when you look at it being a young team.
And even though Andy will not be there, we are probably going to have a special guest host. I will tell you who that is right after this, because I do want to remind you real quick before we get to our picks, before we get to last call, once again, get on the email list. Go to assemblycall.com/subscribe or text Indiana, INDIANA, to 44144. It will get you on our email list. You will get all of our post-game emails, which we don't send out to anyone else, and it's the best way to connect with the show. We send special announcements. We send occasional deals on IU gear, all kinds of goodies by being a member of the email list. Join 1,400 other IU fans who already are. Text Indiana to 44144 or assemblycall.com/subscribe. All right, well, this is the Assembly Call. Indiana wins 59-58 over Wisconsin. We are getting to wrap up here, as we always do, by going on record with our picks for the Big Ten game and then with last call. And I have an important point to make in last call because a lot of people are asking me a question both in the chat and on Twitter. I'm going to address it in last call. But real quick, I do want to let you know, Mark Titus, who a lot of folks know, he's at Club Trillion on Twitter, wrote for Grantland, wrote the college basketball column for Grantland. Grew up an IU fan, played basketball at Ohio State. He is going to join us as a guest host for the Ohio State game. We've been talking about getting him on the show, and this seemed obviously like the greatest time to have him on the show, an IU game featuring Ohio State as well. And so it'll be great. Andy, even though you can't be here, we will have someone to try and step in and fill your gargantuan shoes. We will see how he does, but it should be an excellent treat for everybody. We're really excited to have him, a very smart college basketball fan, and certainly knows Ohio State and Indiana basketball inside and out, so he'll be able to add a lot of really good analysis. We are excited about that. All right, let's go around the horn. Let's go on record with our picks for Indiana, Ohio State, and don't forget to get your picks in. Go to assemblycall.com/picks. We will have the Indiana-Ohio State pick up here soon so that you can make that selection. Andy, we'll go to you first. Indiana or Ohio State?
I've got to go with IU in this one. I think that the experience factor or the inexperience factor with Ohio State is pretty big, and I feel like IU, after struggling some on the offensive end tonight, is due for a good performance on that end of the floor, and hopefully really gaining some confidence from the way they've played lately. They've won games in some different ways. And certainly playing better defensively. Hopefully that gives them some energy, and I think will be nice for this team who's had a decent grind these last couple games. Played a few games here over the last week. It'll be nice to get that extra day and not play till Sunday. I think that'll be good for them to get a little extra rest, particularly with the rotation a bit shorter. So I'm taking the Hoosiers.
Ryan, who you got?
I got the Hoosiers. I think that either Troy Williams, Nick Zeisloft, or Robert Johnson will bounce back and have a really good offensive game. And I think that Yogi Ferrell could hang 25 on Ohio State. And I think that Thomas Bryant will give you his 10 and 7, if not a little more. So I think that it'll be a balanced attack for the Hoosiers, but I also think that one of those guys who has kind of been off over the last couple games will bounce back finally and have a big game. And I think it'll be close in the first half, and I think the talent level that IU has and the inexperience of Ohio State will show up in the second half, and they'll put away a pretty solid win.
Will, who you got?
Yep, I'm just going to say Indiana as well. I thought about a whole big spiel about it, but last week I kind of botched the pick, so I'm just going to say Indiana and move on.
And I'm picking the Hoosiers as well. Ryan actually said pretty much everything I wanted to say. I think Zeisloft and Johnson will both bounce back. I'm not a big fan of inexperienced teams coming into Assembly Hall, and I think the Hoosiers are rolling. I think they gained a lot of confidence tonight, even though it was an ugly win. You can gain confidence from winning games like this. And just think about all the threes that rattled in and out for Indiana. If those go down, it can change momentum. This could have been a different game. So I like Indiana's chances. I think they'll play really well and get to 4-0 in Big Ten play, which would be a huge start for this team. We'll see if they can do it. All right, it's time for last call. Final thoughts on tonight's IU victory, and we will go to Ryan for his last call first.
Yeah, I just want to again emphasize Yogi Ferrell really closed that game down, and that was huge to see for Indiana, for a senior really jumping in and making a big play late with that pull-up jumper, and then stepping to the line, showing no nervousness, and just especially for a guy who struggled missing free throws the last couple games, to really just step up, knock down every free throw he took down the stretch, and really just take over a game and finish it. And I thought that was huge, not only for him but for the rest of the team to know, hey, that's our go-to guy, and that gives you confidence heading late into close games that you have somebody who can take over or who can direct the offense and who can maybe suck away some of the defense's attention from other guys, get other guys open looks. So that's really all I've got. I just thought it was a great performance by Yogi. One of those signature kind of wins to beat a Wisconsin team that came in that was game and ready to play. And Wisconsin hits a few more shots, which isn't their MO. But if they get a few more shots to drop, there's a chance that they're up 10 on Indiana in midway through the second half. But I thought Indiana really took over the game, backed by Yogi Ferrell, and won it, and it was a big deal. Anytime you beat Wisconsin in conference play is a big deal. So regardless of how the team is, whether Bo Ryan's there or not, getting that win over Wisconsin was big.
Will, last call.
Yep, I'm going to kind of echo here a little bit what Ryan said about Yogi. Proud of the way he stepped up late in the first half. He had 4 turnovers to go with his 4 points, only 2 of 6 from the field. But then in the second half, he had 2 assists and 15 points. Combined, those count for 57.1% of Indiana's second half shots. That's huge, and we need more of that going forward. Other than that, I'm probably going to have a couple nightmares tonight about all the air balls that we saw from the offense. Those were kind of scary. And then maybe they practice a little bit more on, the McCracken court, because perhaps, the practice court's maybe just a couple inches longer, because I'm not certain why they keep running on the baseline too many times. I think it was like 3 or 4 by my count today that our turnovers came from stepping on the baseline. So need to get comfortable back there on the court.
You're going to have nightmares because you saw Brian Urlacher with hair. Don't blame it on our air balls.
Hey, I was trying not to bring up the Bears today, but thank you for doing it.
Seriously, what is going on with that, Brian Urlacher? I've been wanting to mention that all day. What? No, we're done. Okay, yeah.
And here I am biting my tongue. Okay, that's weird.
Andy, last call.
Well, I guess a couple things. One, from this game, that IU forced 3 shot clock violations, which I'm pretty sure made me black out at one point. So hopefully that's a turning point for the defense. I thought that was pretty impressive, considering I'm not sure how many they forced over the course of the entire season before that. But the other thing I wanted to talk about is just a little more big picture. Looking at, we talked a lot about IU's schedule and what that really looks like coming up. And I looked a little bit yesterday at both, the Pomeroy rankings and the RPI. RPI at this point of the season is a little dicey to get into too much. It's going to change a lot, but I think a couple numbers here really underscore why IU needs to keep winning these early season games. So if you look at Pomeroy rankings, this includes the Wisconsin game. So the 7-game stretch that started tonight, the average ranking of the opponents is 94. The last 9 is 53, and if you take out the few teams in that last 9 that are not very good, namely Penn State, Nebraska, and Illinois, the average ranking of those other 6 games is 12. So that becomes really important. RPI is a very similar story. I won't necessarily get into those numbers, but it definitely tells a similar story. And I think that it becomes important for IU to be able to win, to win these games that it should win, and hopefully build some confidence and build some good experience along the way. And I thought tonight was a chance to do that. This isn't the Wisconsin teams that we've seen the last few years. It certainly isn't last year's team, but it's a team that has a really defined structure that has given IU problems in the past and gave them problems at times tonight. But if nothing else, feels like a good sign they were able to get over the hump and get a win. And again, this team being able to win in different ways other than just outscoring people, as we had become accustomed to for a little bit, I think is pretty important. So for me, if I want to take something great away from tonight's game, it's that. There are certainly things to work on. The turnovers are still concerning, but I thought in a game where they didn't play their best offensively, continuing to figure out what life is going to be like without James Blackman on both ends of the floor, whether that be good or bad. I thought it was good they found a way to win, found a way not to let the game get away from them in the first half, and really came back and played well. So a win's a win. They don't all have to be pretty, but it goes in the win column just the same. And so 3-0 in the Big Ten sounds pretty good, and hopefully that can go to 4-0 on Sunday.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I just want to give a quick hello to all the new people in the chat. Starting to see some familiar names like Candy Stripes in there and Gerb, some of our longtime listeners. And we got Jordan in there today providing a lot of insight in the chat. So nice to see you all again in the chat. If you go to assemblycall.com/live, all you need is a free membership to the Assembly Call website. You can participate in that chat. It continues to grow. We have great people moderating it. We're so fortunate to have people moderating that chat. So get in on that conversation. So real quick, people have asked, is this really an impressive defensive performance from Indiana considering Wisconsin's offense isn't that good? And no, Wisconsin's offense isn't that great, especially in comparison to last year's juggernaut. But Wisconsin's offense isn't bad, right? Like let's remember that. The Badgers, when you look at their KenPom ratings, they're 53rd overall in KenPom, and offensively they're 87. So they're not great. But I will take you back to just a few weeks ago when a sub-300 offense in Kennesaw State came into Assembly Hall and put up 72 points. And granted, part of that was that it was just a much higher paced game than this one, but that Kennesaw State team, I'm pretty sure, had like 1.02 or 1.03 points per possession. It was an awful defensive performance. And so to see Indiana, hold a team like Wisconsin to 0.93 points per possession when they have, all Big Ten caliber players like Bronson Koenig and like Nigel Hayes and emerging players like Ethan Happ, that's a really good defensive performance. So no, it's not like Indiana stopped last year's Wisconsin and held them to 58 points. But for this team and the growth that we're looking for, we've been talking about how just marginal improvement on defense could make such a big difference. Well, let's step back and recognize it when we're seeing it. And we've seen it these last couple games. And when you look at Indiana's KenPom ranking, yeah, the offense has dipped a little bit and is now only 17th in the country, but the defense is now 94th. And no, that's not overly impressive, but it sure is better than it's been. And it's a big reason why Indiana has been able to tough out, this game against Wisconsin and that game at Nebraska, which frankly, feel like games that maybe last year's team doesn't win. And certainly the 2014 team isn't going to win. But this team is finding a way to win those games. And as Andy said, winning these games early in Big Ten play is of paramount importance because there is a juggernaut, a gauntlet coming at the end of this season, and we need to put as many wins in our back pocket as we can right now. And so you can make all the caveats that you want about the schedule strength so far, but 3-0 is 3-0. And sometimes winning when your biggest strength isn't there, and for Indiana that's offense, winning a game like that can give you confidence because this team can now look at it and say, look what happens when we defend. And, man, when those shots start falling again and we pick up the offense again, we're going to be really good when we play on both ends. And when you get the infusion of energy and fundamentals and focus from guys like OG and Juwan, someone mentioned in our chat that if you go back and look at the comments that Juwan and OG made as high school seniors, what they wanted to bring to Indiana, they talked about grit and toughness. Juwan Morgan talked about doing the dirty work. They are doing exactly what they said they were going to do, and their infusion of that energy and fundamentally sound defense has made a huge impact on this team. So it's a rough day for Indiana when you lose one of your best players in James Blackman Jr., but it's an encouraging day when you come out against a team that was in the Final Four last year and has players who played prominent roles on that team, and you see young guys step up and play like they did, and you see your senior leader in Yogi Ferrell take the bull by the horns and lead this team to a victory at the end where every possession mattered and every single point mattered, that's encouraging. And you think back to where this program was just 3 or 4 weeks ago, and to be where they are now on this winning streak, undefeated in Big Ten play so far, you can't help but be encouraged. I know I am. I hope you are. And hopefully the Hoosiers can keep it going with another strong performance and another win against Ohio State because, no matter what's coming at the end of the season, 4-0 would look pretty good with a couple of road wins already, and that's what Indiana can be if they take care of business at home against Ohio State. Hopefully they can. We will be here right after the game with another episode of the Assembly Call, and we hope you will join us either at assemblycall.com/live for the live show, listen to the podcast, you can go to assemblycall.com/iTunes or listen in on the Sports Buzz in Louisville, who now simulcast the show. And to all of you who are listening there, hello, we appreciate it, and we look forward to welcoming you into the audience. We're very glad to have you as listeners to the show. All right, everybody, we will talk to you Sunday after IU Ohio State. Way to go. Big win tonight for the Hoosiers.